Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Family Treehouse, a podcast series brought to you by Storied, where I chat with people that have a passion for genealogy, storytelling, or both. I'm your host, Heather Haunert, and I am super excited today to be able to chat with Lisa Lisson of Are You My Cousin? Welcome, Lisa. So excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Heather. I've been looking forward to talking with you.
Good. Well, I'm excited that you're here. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your background and how you kind of got started in the field of family history and storytelling?
Sure. So I'm kind of a newbie when it comes to being in the family history genealogy world. I actually didn't start till my kids were probably elementary school age. We had dinner with some friends and we got to talking about family history. And the next day, my children decided it was too hot to go to the pool here in North Carolina because in August, it's very hot and the pool water feels like bath water. So they're like, no, Mom, we don't want to do that. We want to Google ourselves. So
I love that.
that is really kind of how things got started. Of course, you can imagine how that went, but it got us talking, it got us exploring about what stories do we know? What can we find who we are related to? And that's sort of how we started getting into it. I had grown up with a lot of stories, so I knew quite a bit. I was fortunate enough to know a lot of my older generations in the family. So I'd had stories, but I'd never ever really put together things per se. And so that was kind of what got me started on that search to really say, okay, who were these people and what are the stories in the family?
Yeah, I love that. I love how everyone's story about how they got started is just a little bit different. So I love to hear those. Why do you think storytelling is such an important part of family history?
Well, I think storytelling is really actually kind of the crux of it. When I look at it, I think it's important to us because it tells us who our ancestors were from a personality standpoint, from a thinking standpoint. And I think as researchers, that is so important for us to know when we're looking for records. But I think even on a deeper level, I think it's really about connection, that when we have those stories, we connect to those ancestors better. When we can share those stories with our children, we can make those stories come alive for them. We can get people who are not the genealogists in the family, not, the ones who really not those stories again kind of thing, but we can help them understand and make that connection. When we can put those stories in context, then they understand. When you're teaching your 16-year-old how to drive and you can tell him about the story when his great grandmother went to take her driver's test and how she sideswiped the fence post, that connects. Then he had a connection there. And so that was a really lovely story I was able to tell my son and really kind of have that connection calm the nerves just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and don't you think too that the story connection is what they remember? They're not going to remember the dates or the middle names or even maiden names, but they'll remember the stories that people tell.
They will definitely remember the stories.
How do you go about do you have any kind of process that you use when you go about writing a story for your family history?
I was thinking about this earlier and I thought, I think really I just open up a Google Doc and start writing.
Go for it.
I just go for it, basically. I was very hesitant. Now, I started out my blog, Are You My Cousin, started out as a family, strictly for the family, because cousins and family were asking me what I was finding. So I would start to write up these little stories so that they could, I could share that out easier than going through my email.
Yeah.
All these different cousins. And so what I found is that really I just started writing. I never considered myself a writing, didn't particularly like it in school. But when I started writing family stories, when I started writing the blog, I just took a deep breath and just dove right in and basically tried to forget all the things that I should be doing, as far as writing rules and, having that English teacher sitting on my shoulder, so to speak. My English teachers, because they did teach me very well. But when I could just write what I wanted to write, just almost like a flow of consciousness, that I think they call it stream of consciousness
They do.
writing, then it just allowed me to tell those stories so much easier and get it out there. I've decided early on that just getting it out, having it written was so much better than trying to wait for perfection to set in, that I wanted to get those stories out there. So I think part of it was when I sit down, and I still do this, I think about, okay, I'm not trying to write an essay for English class. I'm just trying to tell the story. And I just start. Sometimes, though, here is a trick I will do. Sometimes I'll start in the middle, because that's kind of the part I'm thinking about. Maybe I remember, cooking with my grandmother. So I might start in the middle, because that's the part I'm remembering how she taught me to make buttermilks. And so I'll start telling that part of it. And then I'll go back and write the kind of an intro into it to, set a context for it.
Yeah, kind of build it up. Yeah. Yeah, you made me chuckle, because I used to teach high school English.
Oh, no.
Glad you said it. But I feel like that's what I try to tell people too, that I don't really care about your spelling and your grammar. I want you to get it out there, no matter how you get it out there. And when you write it and it's not perfect, that's you. That's not, Grammarly or some kind of, program that's writing it perfectly. That's how you write. And I think that's important. So do you have any resources or tools for somebody that, and it can be writing family history or researching family history, that are kind of your go-tos for people that are just starting out?
I think when it comes to just starting out, one of the big things that when I help people learn, or I teach people to do genealogy, one of the biggest pieces that they're missing is they're missing the oral history piece. In other words, they're missing really finding out what is already known in the family. So I think one of the very first things to do is to make sure we're talking to family members. And it doesn't, I use the term oral history interview, but people, it's not even have to be that formal. Just grab a cup of coffee and go sit down and talk with somebody in the family. Now, sometimes I use prompts for that. I actually have a book. I wrote a book on that, with 100 questions to ask grandma. And so using prompts is very helpful with that when you're not really sure, or if maybe I know a lot of children and school children have to do projects like that. I'm like, think of those prompts ahead of time. The other thing that I will do when it comes to getting stories, or if I'm not really sure about who I'm connecting with, it maybe it's that super distant cousin I'm trying to connect with, I take a photograph and I try to use photographs, because that is a great conversation starter to getting that going. I think when you can ask somebody about that, or even just if you're writing the story, when you start with something like a prompt or a photograph, I think that really kind of helps get over that blank page staring at you per se. And then again, too, if for somebody who is just starting out on finding their family histories, just starting out to getting into those records and isn't really sure, I would suggest really any of the major genealogy databases that are out there. There's Ancestry, there's Family Search, Find My Past, My Heritage. They all have fantastic tutorials on their sites. And so I get into, I frequently will recommend those tutorials, because they want people to be successful with the research. And so finding those good beginner tutorials. YouTube also has some really great genealogy researchers on there who are teaching and talking about genealogy research. And so those are some other great resources to start with.
Good. When you interview somebody, do you record them, or do you just jot down notes, or do you do a combination?
I do a combination. I try to record if at all possible. Just on the phone, I'll record it if that's able. But I also still write a lot of notes. That just for me helps me remember if I write something down. I'm very kinesthetic when it comes to that type of learning, and so if I write it down, oftentimes I don't ever have to go back and look at it again. I internalize it a little bit better, but I think it's helpful to kind of do both, but I'll make do with whichever I have to do.
Yes, definitely. This is my hot button question for everyone, it seems like. How do you balance the important when you have a story, and maybe it's one that's been told for generations or whatever, how do you balance the importance of accuracy versus telling a story that is compelling?
I've been thinking about this. So accuracy, I think accuracy is extremely important for me when I'm making sure I tell that story. I want it to be accurate as possible. If it's something that maybe I'm not sure about, maybe the facts don't come up right. Maybe I'm telling that family story that my grandfather told me, but I have to remember that the context he heard the story, he was 5 years old. And so I try to make sure that somewhere within that telling that story, that, this is the story, this is what these are the words he said, but I try to put it in context going, he was 5 years old. How do memories change over time? If I need to fill in somebody's story, again, I might say, my grandmother didn't necessarily say this, but I knew her. So my guess is she was thinking something like that. But I strive for accuracy as much as possible, certainly with that, and recognizing that we can't always know the accurate truth. People didn't always share it. And sometimes that accurate truth is not necessarily something people want to remember. Maybe whether it was the time, whether there's ongoing, if there was a trauma in the family, or whatever. Not everything is for me to tell. Not everyone is my story to tell. And so I just recognize that.
Yeah, I love that. Putting it into perspective for that age. That was great. And just knowing your family members, and she might have said this. Those were great. Those were great tips. Thank you for those. My favorite part is, can you share a particularly memorable experience you've had while researching a family story, or do you have a favorite family story that you would like to share with us?
Oh my gosh, how long have you got here? So I have, when I had started out, and this was back when my website, the Are You My Cousin, was really just a family blog for the family. And I recognized I had people reading it besides my mother. And so I thought, okay, anyway, so I am very fortunate. I collected a large number of family photographs. They came to me because I had this interest in family history and nobody really knew what to do with them. Unfortunately, a lot of them were not labeled, as is the case for a lot of us. So I have these, and I actually posted one time, and I was talking about the woman. It was an older woman, and then she was surrounded by 6, 7 other people, most of them children. And I just posted up there and said, this is my great grandmother. And I talked about Clara, and I talked about a little what I knew about her. And 5 months after I put that out there, 5 months, I got an anonymous comment that said, "That's my grandmother." And I was like, "Wait, what?" He goes, I was like, "That's my grandmother." And I'm like, "Okay, let's try this again." So I took another photograph that I had that was of the same time because she was dressed the same. And I said, "Okay, let's
That's good.
Let's try it again." And he goes, so he did identify himself, and he was a first cousin once removed, maybe twice removed. Anyway, this opened up an entire side of the family. Now, this family was I knew who they were once he told me and identified, but he identified himself. He identified everybody in the photographs. We had a connection. I was able to go up and meet his mother, who was still living. She was in her 90s. So I was able to interview her about the family history shortly before she passed away. And my father was able to then invite my father up to go to the very first family reunion that he had been to in 60 years. He'd been to this family reunion when he was a little boy. They'd moved away, and 60 years later, he was able to return. And so that was a really special thing to be able to show up at this and meet these cousins. And I had these photographs of as they were children. And so we were able to kind of connect that whole side of the family, get back to go over to the old family home place and walk the property. So it was a really special time to be able to do that.
Yeah, that is amazing. That gives me goosebumps. Those are the best kinds of stories. I love those. Do you have any tips or tricks or pieces of advice or wisdom that you would like to leave with our audience today?
I think I would suggest just go for it. Don't let a blank piece of paper or a blank screen with a cursor blinking at you stop you. Just write down. It doesn't even have to be in full sentences. Just write down what your thoughts are, and just to have it captured. I think that's one of the best things to do. Again, it's better to have it out there if you're trying to share it than to sit around wondering, well, let me get it perfect, and then we'll do it that way. And if you're really struggling, use a family photograph, use prompts. There are prompts online that you can find. There are books out there, you can get journals, and it's a great way to stimulate those conversations with your family or your own memories as well.
I just have to, I'm sneaking this in. I didn't tell you I was going to, but I was on your site. Like, I am all excited. So give us a little like 20-second blurb about your cruise next year. Like,
Oh, yes.
I was like so excited about that.
Right. So I'm going on a cruise. I had a long time. Oh, 20 seconds. Okay. I had a long time
Oh, you're good.
a travel agent. She's like, Lisa, have you ever thought about doing this? So it's a cruise. We're going to the Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, the ABC Islands. We're going on Celebrities Reflection Ship. And so the days that we are at sea, I will be doing a lecture, and I'll have handouts. And what I'm really super excited about, really even more so than having those lectures while we're at sea, is the chance to really get to interact with other genealogy enthusiasts who, while we're having coffee or over a meal, or I think, because I find that those are some of the best times to really be able to connect, to kind of talk over some ideas. I'm super excited about that. And of course, the days we're in port, we're going to enjoy the islands as well.
Yeah, it just looked like so much fun. That's exciting.
You should join us. You should join us.
I'm always willing to go on some kind of trip, and I haven't been to those islands. So
well, okay. I know a person. I can hook you up now.
Great. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your expertise and your passion. I am beyond honored that you spent time with me today, chatting about just storytelling and family history. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
I enjoyed it. Until next time, friends, embrace the power of your family's untold tales and embark on a journey of discovery. Let the ink flow and the words dance as you weave together the threads of your ancestors' lives. Start writing your family stories today and let their voices echo through the generations to come at story.com. Until next time. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Family Treehouse, where we celebrate the power of storytelling and preserving our family legacies. Storied is more than just a platform for sharing stories. Dive into those historical records and newspapers, discovering the hidden gems that bring your ancestors to life. Add branches to your family tree, connecting the dots between generations. Thank you for joining us on this storytelling journey. Your stories matter, and through Storied, they have the power to resonate across time and touch the hearts of generations to come. Keep uncovering your family's history and keep the spirit of storytelling alive with Storied.